Hello everyone, my name is Itinerary. I'm Head of Expedition Operations at Noble Caledonia, and we have with us here none other than Paul Mildon. Paul has been working with Noble for more than 20 years, and he is the genius behind the scenes who knows every little corner of the globe better than those of us who actually operate in them. And he does this incredibly difficult and creative, maybe fun, challenging job of putting the ships all around the world where they need to be. How are you, Paul?
Very well, thank you, Pam. Yes, you?
Yeah, very good. Thanks. Nice to see you.
And you, even if it is in isolation.
Yeah. So, Paul, let me jump right over to the ships we're talking about today. They don't really need too much of an introduction, of course, but our lovely primary fleet, the Sky Fleet, we started with the Island Sky back in 2010. Then 2 years later, we got the Caledonian Sky, and then the Hebridean Sky a little while after that. And of course, we've got Serenissima as well. Our beautiful, beautiful fleet has such a loyal following, and they're such small classic vessels. And you get to pick where to send them.
Yeah. Well, that's probably the key part of my job. The sea side of the business still represents the majority of passenger sales and the business revenue. So it is the most important part of the business in that respect. So we have to work on how do we get the most out of them. So as you say, it's working with the 3 Sky ships first. So we work on where can we put those in the world, and it's all about working on seasons. It's about working on where is the best place to have those ships at those certain times, both for our sales, but also we're working with a number of sub-charter partners as well around the world. So we have partners in Australia, America, and they have different demands and different seasonality for their travels. So it works well for us because it means that we can have the ships in great places for us, but also great places for some of our partners as well. So yeah, it does work on a, as you said, I think it probably is the best way to describe it is a big jigsaw puzzle. We have demand for certain regions, and we just have to make sure that we have those ships in the right places at the right times. So like you said, I think we've got a map actually which sort of indicates this, but we work with the Sky ships so they're the first ships that we deploy, and each ship has got a region that we will work towards. So if we were looking at something like the Hebridean Sky, for example, Hebridean Sky is classically working at the moment with a winter season or a southern summer season in Antarctica, which operates basically from October to March, and then a northern European summer. So operating in the UK, the Hebrides, and either the Baltic or Iceland or somewhere like that. So we have a regional capacity there. Island Sky also has been working in Antarctica for the winter season, but then rather than bring the ship north, that ship operates well with our Australian partners in the Kimberley season for in Northern Australia. So we have to then link Antarctica with Australia, and the only way we can get there is by traversing over the South Pacific, which gives us that opportunity to do those great itineraries through Easter Island, Tahiti, Cook Islands, through Melanesian Islands and into Papua New Guinea and over to Australia. So it gives us that great flexibility and great variety by having the ships in different locations. And then the Caledonian Sky, we can see, is working a little bit more. She has been our Pacific ship for many years, operating in Japan and that part. Moving forward, we're looking to see her in Indian Ocean in the winter months and the Mediterranean, and again Northern Europe in the summer months. So by having the 3 ships, the great advantage I have is the ability to put them in different geographical locations to give us that variety of itineraries.
And then
I was just going to say, once we've worked on the Sky ships, we can then start looking at the additional tonnage that we're bringing in. And Serenissima is another one that we're working on a yearly basis with. And again, once we've deployed, we know that the Hebridean and the Island Sky are going to be in these places, and so we can look at the Serenissima. And the Serenissima works well in Central America and the Caribbean, where we can do some quite unique itineraries before coming back again to Northern Europe, the Baltic, and the Mediterranean in the summer months. So, as I say, by the advantage of having the 4th ship is that we can tag into that sort of Central America and Caribbean side of the world.
Now, you kind of, the way that we showed that and described it was though it's relatively cyclical, but that's not quite the case, because we have such a loyal following on all the vessels, and we're constantly pushing for new itineraries, which is wonderful for me, being at sea, operating these, sometimes challenging as well. But I mean, how do you strike that balance? You just do the same thing over and over. Yeah, you get really, really good at it, but rather pushing to these new itineraries all the time keeps it exciting, not only for our clients, but also for the staff. How do you come up with all these new itineraries all the time, or what's that push?
So, I mean, you're perfectly right. The repeat factor is phenomenal. I mean, on an average trip with one of the sky ships or Serenissima, we can be looking at 60 to 70% of the passengers being repeat passengers. And when I say repeat passengers, we've got people who have traveled with us 10, 15, 20, even 30 times. So they're very loyal, which is fantastic for us. But what comes with loyalty is, as you say, the necessity to innovate, because people will go back to the island sky or the Caledonian sky, but they don't want to go the same places time and time again. So we have to be innovative with that. How do we develop it? Well, we have great partners on the ground, and that's probably one of the most important things. And the other thing is a great team of expedition staff on board the ship, or cruise directors on board the ship. These guys who work on the ships and work on the ground know these areas so well, and they will always give feedback. So we get constant feedback from the ship. And from our companies in these certain countries. So, I mean, a couple of the places we could sort of highlight where we've developed would be somewhere like Central America, where we've been operating for many years, but we were doing a lot of similar stuff in the Caribbean and in Central America. And then we started to look at maybe how can we do something a little bit differently. And El Salvador was one of those examples. For example, we were operating through the Pacific coast of Central America, and we were dropping into El Salvador, but our agent there sort of said, well, there's a load to do here. You only come for one day. Most ships only come for one day. Why don't you come and look at what we can do for longer? And we did adapt it. And we ended up staying for 4 days, and we were the first ship ever to stay for 4 days in El Salvador. We basically were innovative. We created these itineraries, and we've developed that into a sort of staple part of our itineraries.
Yeah.
Another example would be Guyana in northern South America, where again we operated trips there. We spent 3 days in Georgetown because we could then operate trips to Kaito Falls. We could do other stuff in the interior. And when we talked to passengers who were on that trip, a lot of them said the reason they booked was because we had that time in Guyana. And again, no one else was doing that. So it's those sort of things that we can develop, which just give us a little edge over our competitors.
Yeah. It's definitely one of the joys of the job as well. But every itinerary, even if it looks the same, even if it has the same name, it always gets tweaked, because you find things, we find things in the field as we're going, you discover things in the back office. There could be weather events, there could be political events that we need to adapt things. And then when we adapt things, sometimes on the fly, we find something new, and then we have this great feedback loop between us all to say, oh, that worked really well. And then each year you go back and you do things slightly differently. So even the British Isles, which is some of the best expedition cruising out there, and I think a lot of people probably don't think it's all that exotic and exciting, but the number of ways and places you can go to around the Hebrides is incredible. You can do dozens of different types of trips with different focuses there, and it's so nice to keep that diversity and keep it changing.
Well, yeah, I mean, Scotland's a fantastic example. And so we've been cruising in Scotland for the majority of the 30 years we've been operating as a company. We were, as you say, one of the challenges you get in Scotland is the weather. We can't deny that. And that can mean that you have to change things. You need to find islands or anchorages that are outside of swell or wind or whatever, or where we can get a safe landing. And as you say, we've often turned up on islands where we haven't been due to travel there. We've looked at where is the safe place to anchor. We've gone ashore, maybe on an uninhabited island or a small inhabited island, and realised there's some fantastic wildlife there. There's great hiking or walking that we can do there. Just great scenery. And as you say, the next year we'll think, actually, that was a great call we did last year. We've never been there before. We haven't brochured it, but let's add it in. And we will do that. We're always flexible with working with the captain on board, with the expedition team, to just create that best experience and always tweaking it. The great thing about the expedition side of the business is that we can tweak things. And if we think we can improve it by taking something out and adding something in, we'll do that. And 99% of the time, people appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, I know our guests really appreciate that we sometimes take gambles on new itineraries that might not even necessarily sell well, but we'll, give it a go to try and make it work. And I know it means a lot to a lot of the destinations that we're willing to take these sorts of gambles. The first few people that go to a place, after a while, if there's, too many tourists and people going there, it's not that novel that we go there, and maybe we're not even bringing that much to an area as a percentage. But when we go to these brand new types of places, I mean, you mentioned El Salvador and Guyana, I can think of dozens in the South Pacific and Indian Ocean as well, where we are. I mean, even the Outer Hebrides, some of those islands around the Shetlands, where people are so excited to see us, so excited for the exposure, for the patronage. And that's actually, quite a nice part of us pushing out to all these small places, which we wouldn't be able to do if we weren't on such a good relationship between the office and the field, but also on these very small dynamic ships where it's only 100 of us. We've got 10 Zodiacs, we've got 10 drivers. We can just make things happen on the fly or new things happen quite easily.
Yeah, exactly, 100%. And I think that's the beauty of the small ships, is that we can get everybody off at the same time. You've got 10 Zodiacs, 100 passengers, so you can get everyone off at the same time. And we can, as you say, if weather changes us, or whether we just, it can just be a passing by and just thinking, actually, this looks like it'd be a great call for us. And that flexibility, and I think that's a great thing the Noble Caledonia has with a relationship with the teams on board the ship, is that we trust the guys on board the ship to make the best decisions on behalf of our clients and the guest experience. So we are very supportive of our staff on board the ship to make any necessary decisions. But the beauty of having these small ships is on expedition, but also on the other side of the business as well, which is more the sort of small ship destination cruising, cultural cruising side. What we can do is we can do very intensive itineraries. So one thing I think the key thing that we've talked about within the business for years is that the itinerary is key. We want to make sure that we have the itineraries that our database, our clients, our passengers want to do, whether that be a cultural itinerary, a wildlife, a natural world. However we want to do that, we can do that. And we do that by both by doing more intensive itineraries as well, and exploring island groups. And we can only do that because we've got the small ships. So places like the Cape Verde, for example, there's some great stuff in the Cape Verde, some great islands in there, but they're only accessible by small ship. Or when you're ashore, you can only really work there with 100 or so passengers.
Yeah.
So we can develop those itineraries to be intensive there. But even on the other side of it, when we look at someone like Sicily, we do some great 8, 9, 10, 11 night itineraries just in Sicily, because there's so much to do there. And why do you want to combine that with necessarily the rest of the Mediterranean if you can concentrate in that area? So that's something else we've tried to develop, those sort of intensive, not over the top, not too intensive, but just see all of an area that you're looking to explore.
Yeah, I think we're also able to focus more deeply on more, isolated areas because of our clientele, because we have such a sophisticated level of traveler that's coming on us. They are well traveled. They don't necessarily need a tick box off the whole of the Med. They're happy to really hone in on Sicily, and it might have a focus like gardens or history or something like that. So I think it's for them as well. They kind of lead us to developing those nicely zoomed in products. And I was going to say, when I started 12 years ago, the skies were amongst the bigger ships. They were the standard or one of the bigger ships. And now it really feels like the end of an era. We've got our 4, if you include the Serenissima, our 4 old, classic, beautiful boats. And there's very few left of that size. And the things we were able to do, which, eventually, the skies won't last forever. You think it will be really a sad day or end of an era when we aren't able to use our little sky fleet anymore. But for now, we're so lucky to be one of the small ships bobbing around out there.
Oh, 100%. You talk about the sky ships, which are operating at around the 100 passenger mark. There are very few. There's a lot of new builds coming out, but they all tend to be a little bit bigger, anything up to 250 passengers. So we're really happy with the size of the ships we've got there. That mean that we can do slightly more adventurous itineraries and get out into the open water a little bit more. But on the flip side of that, we've also seen, and we're seeing this through passenger comments as well, is people actually looking to go smaller and smaller. So rather than go bigger and bigger, suddenly 250 is looking to be quite large. So how do we manage that? And that's why we've developed some new stuff coming through. We work with the ship called the Monet, where we're going down to 50 passengers. And we have the Eleganza ship in Croatia, where we're down to around that sort of 32, 33 passenger mark. And those offer a totally different experience. For those ships, we're offering a much more immersive experience. And what we're trying to do with those itineraries is we do things like we do overnight in port. We have central berths there where we're in the middle of a small town in the Greek islands or in the Croatian coast or somewhere like that. And it means that if we overnight in port, people can actually experience the nightlife in some of these places. And I don't mean the bars and necessarily that, but just having the walk around.
You don't mean just the crew.
Yeah, but you can have the walk around the harbour. You can have take an ice cream as you take a walk around the harbour and do what the local people do, what the Greeks and the Italians do on a summer evening. And that sort of experience is just impossible on anything bigger than the ships that we're looking at. And that's really something I think we're seeing from passengers, from the public in general, is they just want to change the way they travel and have that more immersive experience. And we're able to do that on these ships, as well as we can with the sky ships as well. That's a fantastic thing we can do. But these slightly smaller ships mean that we can get into the even smaller islands. So there's some incredible stuff out there.
Yeah, and I have to say, there's also a certain amount of street cred that comes along when you turn up on a classic boat. Particularly, I always feel that way on Serenissima when we travel around the Caribbean and we go to all these back-end little places, not the big turnaround ports we have to do, but not the big, highly patronized cruise ship places, but we go to these small little islands where it's generally dominated by yachties, and some of those private yachts are bigger than our vessel. And when you turn up on Serenissima, you can sort of see the locals are all like, hey, like, what's that? What's the story with that boat? So they also have the history and that little bit of maritime street cred on these lovely classic old ships.
Yeah, 100%. And we are welcomed. I mean, this is the beauty of having the smaller ships as well, as we are welcomed in a lot of these smaller islands. There is an anti-cruise people out there. And a lot of them will be thinking, oh, we don't want cruise ships coming because they don't want these 900,000, 2,000, 3,000 passenger ships. But they see the benefit of a ship of ours coming in, because we don't bring a lot of people, but we bring people who want to experience just life on these islands or life in these small towns. And that's the beauty that we've got there. And I think, as you say, the smaller the ship do tend to be accepted a little bit more in some of these places.
Yeah. Well, Paul, thanks so much for your time. I know you've got a whole century ahead of you to plan of all the deployments of the vessels, this big puzzle left to do. So, and certainly I must be adapting now quite a bit. But thanks so much for your time, and it's been great to chat about our small fleet.
Great. Good to see you.
All right, you too. Bye.
Bye.